Corduene was an ancient region located in northern Mesopotamia, present-day southeastern Turkey and northern Iraq. According to the 1911 Encyclopaedia Britannica, Gordyene is the ancient name of the region of Bohtan. It is mentioned as Beth Qardu in Syriac sources and is described as a small vassal state between Armenia and Persia in the mountainous area south of Lake Van in modern Turkey. Corduene must also be sought on the left bank of the Tigris. It has been cited as the country of the Carduchians, a fertile mountainous district rich in pasturage. The kingdom of Gordyene emerged from the declining Seleucid Empire, and for most of its history, it was a province of the Roman Empire and acknowledged the sovereignty of Rome. From 189 to 90 BC, it enjoyed a period of independence. The people of Gordyene were known to have worshipped the Hurran sky god Tezhub. Carduchians in Xenophon. A people called the Carduchians are mentioned in Xenophon's Anabasis. They inhabited the mountains north of the Tigris in 401 BC, living in well-provisioned villages. They were enemies to the king of Persia, as were the Greek mercenaries with Xenophon, but the response to thousands of armed and desperate strangers was hostile. They had no heavy troops who could face the battle-hardened hoplites, but they used longbows and slings effectively. And for the Greeks, the 7 days spent in traversing the country of the Carduchians had been one long continuous battle, which had cost them more suffering than the whole of the troubles at the hands of the king and Tisiphons put together. They have been also mentioned as Gordy by Hecataeus of Miletus c. 520 BC. Pompey and Corduene, both Phraates III and Tigranes the Great, laid claim to this province. However, it was conquered by the Roman troops under Pompey. The local population did not defend the Armenian rule since, according to Plutarch, Tigranes had demolished the native cities and had forced them into exile in Tigris.It. In 69 BC, Zabinus, the king of Corduene, was secretly planning for a revolt against Tigranes. He was negotiating with Appius Claudius for Roman help. However, the plan was revealed and he was killed by Tigranes. After this, Lucullus raised a monument to Zabinus and then he took over the region of Corduene. He took part in the funeral of Zabinus, offered royal robes, gold and the spoils, and called him his companion and confederate of the Romans. After Pompey's success in subjugating Armenia and part of Pontus, and the Roman advance across the Euphrates, Phraates was anxious to have a truce with the Romans. However, Pompey held him in contempt and demanded back the territory of Corduene. He sent envoys, but after receiving no answer, he sent Afranius into the territory and occupied it without a battle. The Parthians who were found in possession were driven beyond the frontier and pursued even as far as Arbela in Adiabene. According to an inscription dedicated to the Temple of Venus, Pompey gave protection to the newly acquired territory of Gordyene. Armenian presence. Tigran retained Gordyene and Nisibis, which Pompey withheld from the Parthians. Gordyene belonged to Urartu for about 200 years and to Armenia for about 250 years. Districts of Corduene under Armenian period were Korduk, Kordik-Nurkan, Kordik-Veran, Kordik-Mijin, Shauk, Itvank, Vorsarank, Agark, Motolank, Kartunik, Albag, Diocletian and Corduene. Corduene was conquered again by Diocletian in the 3rd century and the Roman presence in the region was formally recognized in a peace treaty signed between Diocletian and the Persians. Diocletian then raised an army unit from this region under the title Ala 15 Flavia Cardunorum, naming it after his Caesar Flavius Valerius Constantinus. Following the defeat of Narse, the Sassanid king, at the hands of the Romans in 296. A peace treaty was signed between the two sides, according to which the steppes of northern Mesopotamia, with Singara and the hill country on the left bank of the Tigris as far as Gordyene, were also ceded to the victors. The name of the province appears again in the account of the campaign between the Persians led by Shapur II and the Romans led by Julian the Apostate. The Romans started to retreat through Corduene after they could not besiege Ctesiphon. Shapur's campaign against Gordyene. In the spring of 360, Shapur II staged a campaign to capture the city of Singara. The town fell after a few days of siege. From Singara, Shapur directed his march almost due northwards, and leaving Nisibis unassailed upon his left, proceeded to attack the strong fort known indifferently as Pinaka-Abezabda. This was a position on the east bank of the Tigris, near the point where that river quits the mountains and debouches upon the plain, though not on the site. It may be considered the representative of the modern Jezire, which commands the passes from the low country into the Kurdish mountains. It was much valued by Rome, was fortified in places with a double wall, and was guarded by 3 legions and a large body of Kurdish archers. Shapur sent a flag of truce to demand a surrender, joining with the messengers some prisoners of high rank taken at Singara, lest the enemy should open fire upon his envoys. The device was successful, but the garrison proved staunch, and determined on resisting to the last. After a long siege, the wall was at last breached, the city taken, and its defenders indiscriminately massacred. In 363, a treaty was signed in which Jovian ceded 5 provinces beyond the Euphrates, including Corduene and Arzanene, and towns of Nisibis and Singara to the Sassanids. Following this treaty, Greeks living in those lands emigrated due to persecution of Christians at the hands of Shapur and the Zoroastrians. Corduene was a bishop's see since at least 424. Corduene in the 6th and 7th centuries. In 578, the Byzantine Emperor Flavius Mauritius Tiberius Augustus defeated the Sassanid army led by Chosroes I, and conquered Corduene and incorporated it once again in the Roman Empire. The Roman army also liberated 10,000 Christian captives of the Sassanids. According to Khwarizmi, Arabs conquered the area along with Nisbis and Ta'abdan in 640. List of kings. Zarbianus, early mid-1st century BC, a king of Corduene who made overtures to Appius Claudius when the latter was staying at Antiochia, wishing to shake off the yoke of Tigranes. He was betrayed and was assassinated with his wife and children before the Romans entered Armenia. When Lucullus arrived, he celebrated his funeral rites with great pomp, setting fire to the funeral pile with his own hand, and had a sumptuous monument erected to him. King Manassarus, 115 AD, he took control over parts of Armenia and Mesopotamia in the time of Trajan. The Parthian king Osroes declared war against him, which led to Manassarus siding with the Romans. Ardashir, 340 AD, he was against the Christianization of Corduene. Jovinian, 359 AD. Corduene, Carduchi, and the Kurds. 19th-century scholars, such as George Rawlinson, identified Corduene and Carduchi with the modern Kurds, considering that Carduchi was the ancient lexical equivalent of Kurdistan. This view is supported by some recent academic sources which have considered Corduene as Proto-Kurdish or as equivalent to modern-day Kurdistan. There were numerous forms of this name, partly due to the difficulty of representing KH in Latin. The spelling Carduchoi is itself probably borrowed from Armenian, since the termination choi represents the Armenian language plural suffix KH. It is speculated that Carduchi Carduchi spoke an old Iranian language. Jewish sources trace origins of people of Corduene to marriage of jinns of King Solomon with 500 beautiful Jewish women. The same legend was also used by the early Islamic authorities to explain origins of Kurds. Timeline of the history of Corduene. To Urartu 9th century 595 BC. To Media 595-550 BC. To Persia 550-331 BC. To Alexander the Great 331-301 BC. To the Seleucid Empire 301-189 BC. Independent 189-90 BC. To Armenia 9066 BC. To the Roman Republic 6627 BC. To the Roman Empire 27 BC AD 37. To Parthia 37-47. To the Roman Empire 47-252. To Persia 252-287. To the Roman Empire 287-384. To Armenia 384-428. To Persia 428-651. To several Muslim states. To the Safavid Iran in 1507-1508. To the Ottoman Empire in 1514.